If you could describe radical acceptance and self-care in one word, phrase, or mantra, what would it be?
Abundant love. The fabric that brings us together is that abundant love of life. We're little cells, but our larger body is magnificent being that's just spiraling in the universe with so much love. We forget who we are as a planet, as nature, as water, as stone, as air. And that's what I think the teachings of the elders and the ancestral teachings speak about, this boundless love.
Welcome, queer kittens and new earballs. I'm V, a two-spirit human, joy influencer, energy worker, and a dad joke connoisseur. All pronouns accepted. A little bit about what Quest is, just in case you haven't been with us. We are a podcast where we help queer folks find radical acceptance and love for themselves and for others. And wherever you are in your wellness journey, just know you're not alone. We hope this podcast brings you joy, where you'll learn, laugh, heal, and grow. This season, we've had the privilege of having a few incredible multidisciplinary artists on the pod lately. Aima the Dreamer, Madame Gandhi, just to name a few. You know, I'm not trying to brag over here. But today, our special guest is the one and only Chhoti Maa, pronouns they and ella. I saw Chhoti Maa perform because they are a rapper, singer, songwriter from Guanajuato, Mexico. I saw them at a two-spirit ceremony and then bumped into them again at ceremony on Alcatraz for Thanksgiving, quotations with the fingers. Their music hit me so hard because you can hear in the lyrics, they're trying to deconstruct colonialism, the ancestral medicine that's in the music, the queerness, the migrant empowerment, the love, that radical sisterhood. You feel it just rooted in their music. Today, you're going to learn a little bit more about who Chhoti Maa is on stage and off stage. Because off stage, they're an educator, an organizer, producer, curator, multidisciplinary is what I'm telling y'all. Before we jump into it though, we're just gonna give you a little taste of their song Agua Corre.
Agua corre, agua corre por los montes, agua corre en mi sangre, agua corre en mi cachete, son mis lágrimas, agua corre en la mañana. Agua corre, sí, por la montaña, por la calle, por la noche, sí, por la ventana. Agua corre por tus venas. Agua corre por la comida que envenena. Agua corre, sí, como un migrante.
If you purchase their music on Bandcamp, they actually get a higher percentage of the funds. So support your artists, y'all. You'll find their link to their Bandcamp in our show notes. So, without further ado, with all the excitement in my heart, here's Chhoti Maa.
Hey folks, I'm Chhoti Maa, Brenny Cellini Castillo. I am originally from Guanajuato, Mexico. I'm a multidisciplinary artist, curator, and educator. And I've been producing music, writing, paintings since 2007. My sun sign, right? Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
My sign is Pisces, and my rising sign is Sagittarius, and my calendar name is Sequat.
And what calendar?
Oh, right. That is in what we call the Tonalpohualli, which is a calendaric system that comes out of what we call Anahuac, present-day Mexico, Guatemala, Central America. It means one snake. So everybody traditionally in the past and to this day, gets named by the potential and the numeral of the day. So mine is one snake, Sequoia.
That's so cool. I'll have to link up with you to try to figure out my calendaric name.
Yeah, I'd love to. I'm trying to learn how to read it and write it. So I need the practice.
If you could describe who Chhoti Maa is today, how would you describe that?
I feel that at this moment in my life, I'm a student again, and it feels really good to be in that space of learning and play, especially because I've been an educator for this year. I have been teaching for 15 years. So it's a long time. So right now I feel like I'm a student again, and there's so much more space to grow and to play. And I think right now, as Chhoti Maa, that project started in 2007. That's almost 17 years. I think Chhoti Maa is also going through a transformation. I feel like I'm in this space of experimentation and a rebirth as well. You know what I mean? I feel like my music is shifting, and the way I'm working is shifting, and the way I'm presenting my work is shifting. I feel like I was for a long time in a chrysalis, like I was transforming and definitely in this metamorphosis. And I think now I'm beginning to see those shifts in my behavior, but also the way that those shifts nurture and transform my relationships with others, especially with my family. So that's where I am. I'm in this space of play, transformation, and it's so exciting. Sometimes you can get stuck with thinking that this is the way that you're doing something, but life will shake you and ask you to shift.
Yeah, especially when you're open to it. And it sounds like you're pretty open to it, because what you find excitement in, a lot of people find fear in. I gotta give you an applause on that one, on seeing the playfulness in it and the excitement of this change and of this transformation. I'm excited for that.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I saw you perform for the first time the Counterpulse Two-Spirit ceremony. And my partner took me on a surprise day and everything, and ended up there at this ceremony. And the whole thing, all of it, for me felt like a meditation, but also healing of connecting me deeper with my ancestors. And when you performed, a lot of it was in Spanish, and I don't speak it, but my partner was telling me different lines that you were saying, because she was just get all surprised in certain things you said. And one of them that stuck with me, I think, was from your song Agua Corre. And you had talked about they tried to bury us, but they didn't know that we were seeds. And that has stuck with me ever since that day. And bumping into you on Alcatraz and reconnecting with you, we just kept being magnetized towards you. And then I looked up this article before we were doing this about I think it was El Tecolote article.
Yeah, El Tecolote.
Yeah, and their headline about you was that you channeled the soul of your ancestors through your hip hop. And I was just that is just a beautiful way to explain what I experienced through what I like to say is your medicine, is one of your medicines that you offer. And when I was looking up more and getting deeper, I was kind of curious. I was where does Chhoti Maa come from? That name, what made you decide Chhoti Maa?
I went through a few names actually when I first started. And when I first started making music, I was at first part of two other people's projects. two other dudes. I was in like duos. And in both instances, it just didn't feel right. It just felt like I couldn't really be myself. And in that period of time, I was living in Richmond, Virginia. And in Richmond has a really strong, particularly then, I think still to this day, has a really strong art scene and has a legendary punk scene and DIY scene. And I was doing a lot of different work. I started teaching. I was organizing with the People United and different migrant organizations. And I was also going to this one event. I was a Bollywood night. And in this period of time, me, my sister, and one of my cousins, Erika, we would just stay home, blaze, and watch Bollywood films. And we were like, just like nerding out on Bollywood films. And so in this period of time, I also was dating someone from the Desi diaspora and was a student of the late Dina Bangdel, who was a very prolific art historian from Nepal, already passed away. And in this period of time that I was taking her class, I was doing an investigation of ecofeminist artists in India. So specifically Nalini Malini and Navjot Altaf. And in this analysis of the cultural production that they did, I came up to understand the way that India was constructing the nation state. And I was analyzing different media. And one of the media I analyzed is called Chhoti Maa. So it's actually a film from the 40s. And why it registered with me, or why it had this impact with me, was because of the way that it was portraying motherhood and a nation. And in this period of time, I was also recovering from a very abusive relationship, an abortion, and I had started teaching. And so I had made a promise to myself that I was going to investigate or feel through what my own motherhood could be like, right? A motherhood to myself, but also a motherhood outside of what we're told maternity can be, right? And so it was in this period of time, like I said, that I started teaching. And I started teaching conflict resolution. I started teaching art in different schools in Richmond. And I felt connected with this idea of, one, not just mothering myself, but being maternal figure, mothering in a way that was productive in a society. When I think about it as time passes, and now that I'm in this point in my life that I'm studying very closely, not just the medicine, but the calendaric system and the semiotic language of my people, the people I come from in Mexico, there are so many different representations of different kinds of leaders and particularly different kinds of essences. And there's a lot of governing or generating essences that have this element of motherhood or mothering. So it's interesting how different things sort of loop back or spiral back in. That's where that name comes from. I named myself Chhoti Maa. Yeah, so Chhoti means little, and Ma is pretty universal. But Chhoti is little in Hindi, actually. Yeah, that's it. And it comes from this movie. Yeah.
And through Chhoti Maa, you're able to spread like that motherly, nurturing flavor through your music, through your words.
It was a promise, it was a promise to myself because I felt the challenge, anybody that has had an abortion, you are faced with this very tough decision. And I wanted to give that energy to children that needed that energy. So that's why I became a teacher so young. And then it just kept developing. And it's interesting because, as I've grown, I have a friend. I love them so much. They're my cousin Dio Gandhi, Mohawk Two-Spirit agriculturalist and MC. And they call me Chhoti Maa. So I love that. They're like Chhoti
I love that.
Maa.
Hey.
Yeah, so I like that, that I also feel like mothering doesn't need to be gendered, because I feel like one of the mothering essences in my family was actually my dad, who passed away, but he was very much of a mother figure to not just me and my sister, but to my grandma, to his own mom, and to all his siblings. He was such a mothering essence and was so nurturing and so giving. Yeah, so I like what it means, at least for me, right? A lot of people don't know that, but that's what it means for me.
Does Chhoti Maa or Chhoti Paa have a message that you might think the world needs to hear right now?
I think one of the things that has happened to me in the last 4 years since my father died was this confrontation with life and like death, right? And I think one of the things that grief makes you understand and feel is your body in a different way. You feel a different weight to your body. Because of that, it makes you face your fears, and it makes you face the things that you have hidden, right? The things that you have compartmentalized and put away and try to hide. And I think that going through this, what I feel like is an initiation of life, which is death, the death of a close one. It challenges you to embody your principles in a different way. And so I think I may have not always done that to the best of my ability, but that is what I'm striving for. I'm striving to be able to have equilibrium and a coherence, really, with what I say in my music and what I do in my day-to-day life, right? And I think that also doesn't just go into like what is public facing of my life, but it goes so much into the way in which I'm in relationship with myself or with my family. So that is one of the things I feel that my work tries to put out or project or reflect, is an embodiment, right? And just embodying really those principles or those ideas that we have. And it's hard. It's not easy. I see peers of mine, or I see people that are in a similar path as me, with no shade, but like selling McDonald's or making these kind of like decisions that can catapult their work into a different arena. And I think that in many ways, I have tried to embody my principles. And so sometimes that has closed a lot of different things from my path. But at the same time, it has allowed me to maintain my integrity. So I think that with my work, I try to embody and also maintain my integrity. And I'm very proud of how I've been able to do that.
Yeah, I know that sometimes that could be hard. And that, like, practice what you preach, also having grace if you fall out of that. And finding your ways back to it. Just because sometimes it's like you put yourself in this box, and then if you fall out of the box, sometimes we're a little rough on ourselves. So
I hear you. I feel like the way I was raised, my family was super strict. My parents were very strict. The bar was very high. So that is something that I think it's something that I always have to balance and really think about. But it also has helped me have a very clear idea of what I am willing to do and what I am willing to give, right? And so that is why I've ended up, a lot of my work has ended up in these different sort of communal spaces or smaller sort of venues or smaller spaces. It is a beautiful experience. I feel held in a different way. There is more intimacy there. I've also, because of the decisions I've made, whether socially, politically, or spiritually, I have challenged different spaces. Yeah, had to close certain doors. So that's sometimes challenging, but I feel that gives me grounding and it helps me to stay transparent. And as a Yemaya or as a Pisces, I feel like I have to really move like water. That's why it's so interesting that like before I knew about who my mother was or before I entered this path and this tradition, I was cold to water. I was
quick.
Yeah, I was working
before you
that
dive
way.
into that. Tell people what they mean, because you and I had a little discussion earlier,
Right.
So I know what you're talking about. But the listeners might be thinking it's your bio mother.
Right. So I am. So I'm in different paths. I'm in different spiritual disciplines, and I'm a ceremonial dancer. But I'm also part of the Orisha Lukumi tradition, and I'm in a house. And the energy that is on my head is Yemaya, so the ocean and the mothering essence, one of the mothering essences of the world that allowed for this world to be here. And when I think about it spiritually, and also when I think about it as far as we know scientifically, water's older than everything else. Water's older than the planet. There's so much that we have to learn from water. And I was teaching today and I taught about Emergent Strategy, which is a book written by Adrienne Marie Brown. And there's a segment that I like to teach. It's called The Principles of Emergent Strategy. So this is the book for folks that are out there.
On YouTube?
Yeah, that went to YouTube and read. But I like that she quotes Bruce Lee, and it says, you must be shapeless, formless like water. When you pour water in a cup, it becomes the cup. When you pour water in a bottle, it becomes the bottle. When you pour water in a teapot, it becomes a teapot. Water can drip and it can crash. Become like water, my friend. I really love that conversation that he was having because it's a video. I think like folks have probably seen it.
Yeah.
And I think about as a Yemaya, as a Pisces, as a musician, as a ceremonial dancer, so many of the teachings come together, right? Even if they're from different communities or different paths, different regions. And I think what I'm striving for in my life is to have that fluidity in my life, to have that nourishment that water provides for my community, for my relationships, to try to be transparent and clear with my actions and my words. And yeah, to really move like water, to really embody the principles that water teaches us.
That's beautiful. And then, with my own experience, like with my partner being an Orisha devotee, I think that we've also made a really big importance on ancestral work. And I know that you were talking about your father passing. Do you think that practicing the Orisha practices has brought you maybe a little bit closer to your father?
Yeah, I think so. I was always this child in my family that was super metiche, like curious. I was always that one, me and my sister, but I was always the one that was like, and who was this? And where do they live? And what do they like to eat? And where were they from? And tell me again what they did that one time. And how did they die? I was always asking these questions. And it was so interesting, growing up with my grandma, part of my life, because she would remind me that when she was a child or when she was young, that they were not allowed to have those kinds of conversations with elders. And so I was mentioning this to you the other day, but I feel like part of my role has been to be an active memory for my family and for the people in my community. And so it was almost like my life was already preparing me to do this kind of work since before, right? Be it because of my potential or just the way I was raised by my grandparent, by my grandmother specifically. Yeah, I just had this interest in understanding as a mixed Indigenous person, as a result of colonization, like how did we come to be and how did these traditions or these medicines or these recipes end up holding us and protecting us? And so I feel that the Orisha path, the Lukumi path has strengthened me, has given me that, as we say, that firmeza, that what my godmother would say, right? That firmeza, to be able to hold this role in a more graceful way. Whereas before I had different spiritual disciplines, like the Orisha path or the ceremonial dancing disciplines, I just was a little bit out of my orbit, a little bit out of place, a little bit lost, a little bit frantic, a little bit like too anxious. You know what I mean? Like the energy was too strong that I couldn't contain it in my body. And I couldn't fully understand all the things that were happening or all the things that I was seeing or perceiving or sensing. And both of those paths, the Tortecayo path and the Orisha path, have helped me to have a better balance in my life and to be of better service to not just myself and my ancestors, but to my community. And to be in a closer relationship with the ancestors, because I think because of colonization and particularly Catholicism, they tried to take those elements out of our communal practices, but they couldn't. We still have something like Days of the Dead. And while it was shifted and shortened because it's actually supposed to be 40 days in a different part of the year, it still remained there. And I think it's this important remembrance, but it's a remembrance, but it's also this active awareness, this mindfulness, right? As Thich Nhat Hanh would say this mindfulness that we are our ancestors, right? That we are embodying them, that they're not so far from us, that they are us, right? And we are them, and that without them, we wouldn't be here. So I feel so humbled and grateful to be able to have this role, because I know that wasn't possible in the way that it is for me today, for other people in my lineage.
Oh, wow. That's so powerful. That brings me a lot to thinking of a lot of the work that me and my partner do too. Like we're trying to relearn what's been lost in our lineages, as well as like unlearn the things that were trying to take us further away from all of the different practices. As we're doing ancestral work, we're feeling closer and closer, not only to them, but to ourselves, which it is wild. Talking about this too has kind of made me think about like, what was it that sparked your wellness journey into, it seems like that like Indigenous knowledge is like almost centering you, because you're talking a lot about balance. So I was wondering like what sparked this wellness journey for you?
It's been sparked a few times, right? But if I think about what were the conditions that set me up on this journey, it was growing up with my grandma, because she was doing sobadas de empacho for people in our community. and never
Can
charging.
you translate that for those who doesn't?
For those who don't speak Spanish, yeah. So sobadas is kind of an abdominal massage that is done to release, one, sort of like emotions that haven't been processed, or two, a food that kind of landed on the stomach in a way that is not productive or helpful. And so I grew up with her practicing that medicine on us, the family, but also people coming to our house to get that kind of support. And she learned from her grandmother. So her grandmother also raised her. I think if I really think about what is the spark that helped me be on this path, aside from like traumatic events or different kinds of challenges I faced with my health, I think if I really look at the spark, it's my grandma, and it's this legacy that survived in my family, because I come from Guanajuato, which is a central state in Mexico, but I am mixed, multi-ethnic, multiracial, but I'm also mixed from different parts of the territory, of the Mexican territory. Because of this, there's just different kinds of knowledge that live inside me. And I think that once I migrated and I dealt with like the shock of what it means to be a migrant, it helped me hold on to those roots. And it helped me give myself orientation, so that although I went through a lot of intense spirals in my life, that always helped me root back. And as I grew as a person and as a young person, that was always there. That was always an element that was there. And so now I've been, particularly here in the Bay, this is my 12th year. And in these 12 years that I've lived here, the Bay has allowed me to really delve deeper into that knowledge with just the different intersections of communities and cultures and medicine practitioners and elders and teachers that have enriched my life. And so I feel that my grandma was that spark. And then the Bay Area allowed me to really simmer in that knowledge. And that's why when you ask me, like, where am I right now, right? Who is Chhoti Maa today? Who is Brenny Michelin Castillo today? That's why I feel so much like I'm a student at this moment, right? I'm learning from my elders. I'm learning from my family. I'm learning from different teachers in the community. And I feel so privileged and so humbled and thankful to be able to learn, because I know that it wasn't easy for this knowledge to survive. And I know how much it took us to be able to even have a space like this to talk about it. You know, I think for so many years, different kinds of things were not discussed, were not talked about. And to some extent, there's certain things I can't talk about. There's certain things in the practices I can't disclose. But just to have the ability to name them is, I know that it's a huge shift from the kind of life that some of my ancestors lived, you know, and what they went through.
We were talking about how Rafaela had taken me to the Kickapoo kitchen, and I call it the Kickapoo restaurant or kitchen because I don't want to butcher the name of the restaurant. I know you know the name of it.
Guapop's Kitchen. Yeah.
Guapop's Kitchen. And I was told that it's like the first native owned business in the Bay Area. And we were talking about the soup and how you had soup made by the woman who owns this restaurant, and how it unlocked all of these different things in you, and you were just like feeling like you were shedding levels of lies. And you said that you were like traveling in a life that weaves us. You had said that sentence, and I was just like, it's amazing how a soup can unlock so much.
I think that's another place where I'm so filled with gratitude for the Bay and for Oakland, for Huchin, for the Ohlone people of this land, and for what they bring together, just through their prayers and their resilience. And I was part of this program called the Guardians of the Water, almost like 10 years ago. I ended up in this program because I'm very interested in plants and seeds, as you are aware now that you came to my house and you saw what I grow. I know we have that in common.
Incredible.
And my grandpa was a farmer. He just passed away this last summer. And his grandfather also was involved in selling vegetables, actually, in Mexico City. Anyway, so I've always been very passionate about corn. I love corn. I love corn so much that I tattooed it on both of my engagement ring fingers.
What? That's
because
amazing.
I was like, that is who I'm committed to. I'm committed to corn because of what corn has given us, and corn
Elote.
To me, elote and corn is nothing more powerful than corn in our lives. And it connects so many of our communities in this land, and it feeds the whole world. So anyways, they have a farming program, and this very powerful program is called the Cultural Conservancy created this Guardians of the Water under the leadership of Melissa Nelson, a very prolific professor in traditional ecological knowledge. She used to teach at SF State. I think she's emeritus. When I was there, we just had all these fabulous teachers, incredible teachers, and different kinds of opportunities to work with the land, to work with Tule, to be in community with other indigenous, native, mixed indigenous people. And one of the things that we were able to do one day was just like be with elders, So one of the elders that we met was Diana Almendaris, who is somebody I really love and respect. I worked with her in a project called Fluid Mutualism a couple of years back, but she taught us how to weave with Tule. And Tule in Mexico is also something that we weave with. So there's a lot of connections with northern natives and folks from the Mexican territory. The teacher, Diana Almendaris, she told us that the word for Tule was tlacat. And in Nahuatl, which is one of the indigenous languages I'm learning, the language that's most spoken in Mexico, tlacat means people, the people. So Tule for us is such a powerful, it's a powerful plant because one, it filters water, and two, you're able to weave with it. And so one of the metaphors in the ancient teachings that our elders, our teachers like Maestro Arturo Mesa Gutierrez, Maestro Acache Gomez tell us is that we're weaving life, right? And so as we were learning to weave with this beautiful plant, the folks from Wapapa's Kitchen were cooking some soup with hominy. And when I tasted it, I started crying because first and foremost, I hadn't been around other Kickapoo people, like the Kickapoo lineage in my family almost died because a lot of the people in my great-grandfather's family died during the Mexican Revolution. And that's the case for my other side, the great-grandmother or the great-great-grandmother that taught my grandma how to heal. She was an orphan. Mi tata Camila Montero. She was an orphan in the revolution, the Mexican Revolution. So the Mexican Revolution created a lot of death and was really never resolved. And so to have this moment with these group of people that are like-minded, that are interested in working with the land, that are interested in preserving seas, that are interested in taking care of corn, that are interested in building these strong networks, and to be there eating this soup, it was just like this beautiful gift of life. It was a beautiful gift of life. And I'm so thankful for that moment because it was this salve for my soul.
Oh, that's so beautiful. It's crazy how food can be so healing and can gather us in such a beautiful way, and also can pass down history and pass down stories. Like, food is so much more powerful than I think we give it the credit that it deserves. And in that thought, I was really thinking like, because we have a lot of folks that listen to this podcast who are allies, and I was wondering if like you have any advice on how people can radically protect against the erasure of Indigenous voices.
The most important thing is to be able to listen. And it sounds simple, but it's quite difficult because I think, we're already always kind of conditioned. Our mind moves so quickly like a parrot, and it wants to answer immediately with something sassy or something like funny, a petty comment or like a quick little joke. And I think that especially with the way in which we're consuming information, this quickness in communication is wiring our brain to not slow down and be present and listen. And I think for folks that are from different communities, that is the first thing that we have to do. We have to really listen without judging each other, and we have to give each other grace. And we have to also not make assumptions about where people are coming from or who people might be, depending on how they're dressed or how they are showing up. That is one beautiful, beautiful thing that I have felt from Native folks in the US. I felt the embrace. And I really feel that particularly with my cousin Dio Gandhi, who's from the Haudenosaunee people, from the legacy of the peacemaker and the wampum belt, Mohawk agriculturalist. When I was thinking about all of these things in my life, they really held a space for me and were able to hold me in a way to accept the different parts of myself, right? As a mixed Indigenous person, I also have different European bloodlines and also African bloodlines. And so coming to terms with all of these complex layers of who I am, while at the same time really rooting myself in the Indigenous knowledge and life voice that have helped me and that allowed me to be here, and the plants that hold us together and that brought us together, right? And so I think grace and that compassion that they showed me and that ability to listen and to hold space is something that we can emphasize for folks that are outside of our community, but also for us within the community, to really listen to each other and to really be present for each other without judging. I think all of us have a different understanding of indigeneity and also a different understanding of who we are. A lot of us, as my cousin Dio says, some of our people don't know where they're from. They don't know their tribe. Some of our people may have the name. Some of our people may have lived in the rest, may have lived in their ancestral land, but not everybody. And so just to have that compassion for each other allows for a more strength in our community.
Yeah, I'm one of those people. I know the names of the tribes, but I'm trying to relearn all about, as much as I can, about each tribe, being Yaqui and Hopi, trying to relearn things, and that are not written by a white person, but it's hard to find anything written by Indigenous peoples. But I'm on my journey, and I think the same experience for me. Anyone that I meet that is also Indigenous is like, oh, what's up, cousin? Like really embracing. And I met like a historian at, I'm going to pronounce it,
Wapepe's Kitchen?
Wapepe. At Wapepe's Kitchen, I met a historian who is also Navajo and Chinese, and, learning that to work with all of that, and was just like, oh yeah, whatever you need to know, I will help you. They're here holding us, like you say, and trying to help each other in that and not hold each other against what you don't know. Yeah, so exactly. I agree.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, I look at other folks, other friends of mine I learned so much also from their unique experience. Each experience for Indigenous people is different, depending on the region, depending on the history of their family, depending on migrations, depending on whether or not they married people outside of the community. And so I think just having that open mind helps us to understand things better. And I think at the same time, it helps us to challenge these notions of mestizaje that have been so hurtful.
Can you translate mestizaje?
Mestizaje, for those folks that haven't heard that word, was actually a Mexican national strategy of erasure, of indigenous erasure. And what it was trying to do was to create this fictional identity that could fit into what the nation state was. And Mexico has always been a complicated place, like many places in the world, in the sense that there's so many realities that emerge from it. There's so many different Mexicos, right? I think many of us grew up being told that we were just mestizos, right? Like mixed with Spanish and indigenous. But I reject that a notion. I don't identify with that term because I think that it has been so harmful, not only to mixed indigenous people, but also to indigenous nations within Mexico. And the more that we challenge the official stories of these nation states, the more that we will come to understand about our reality. And I think that's one of the powerful concepts that come out of the Zapatista movement from Chiapas in the 90s is a world with many worlds, right? A world that can hold many worlds and that doesn't want to just have this really strange notion of this oneness without all those differences and intricacies. And it continues to be a very racist propaganda. For many of us, it completely erased, in many Latin American countries, it completely erased the memory and the presence and the acknowledgement of the African roots in our communities. And completely disregarded that as if that didn't exist, as if these nation states weren't the result of plantations, right? And weren't the result of these collisions of different peoples. And so I think that in this process of decolonizing our lives and the way that we think about ourselves and the way that we eat and the way that we look at life, as my cousin Dio Gandhi would say, we have to re-indigenize, right? As Melissa Nelson would say, we have to re-indigenize. And that looks different for us. That looks different for each one of us, depending on our context and our lives. But there's such a powerful place there. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Because if you really look at it, it doesn't matter the color of your skin. We all come from some indigenous peoples, from somewhere in the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we all can re-indigenize ourselves. But in that, I was thinking too, I was like, do you have any advice or wisdom that you would like to give others that are on their journey?
There is in all of us, and particularly people that come from colonized worlds, there's a lot of hunger and pain and thirst. And sometimes that can take over. That thirst or that hunger takes over, and that energy consumes you, right? It consumes your life. And so to be able to reconnect with your roots, reconnect with your culture, I think you have to be first aware of that thirst and that hunger so that we don't become parasites or vultures of our own people's knowledge, right? And I think sometimes what ends up happening is that the thirst and the hunger take over, and can be quite destructive. And I'm specifically thinking about Miyazaki film. I don't know if you've seen Spirited Away. And in Spirited Away, do you remember when there's the shadow being that comes in? And they eat all of these other beings, and they're just trying to be fed, and they're paying the people in that bathhouse to bring them more food and more food and more food, until this little girl says, or this little honest and part of the consciousness, right? If we think about it in a psychological way, this part of the consciousness is like, no, I don't want that money. I don't want your money. And that challenges that hunger and that thirst. And it begins to explode and sort of vomit all of the things that it had eaten that did not belong inside that being, right? And so I think it's like being just respectful of the medicines of each people and the practices of each people and the traditions of each people, and being as a mixed indigenous person, ensuring that I understand also that while we have different tonalities and with different experiences, understanding the way that colorism has also impacted us, right? And the privileges that those of us with lighter skin tones have, and challenging that, and challenging all the different ways in which colonization and the arms of colonization continue to hurt us, right? And so to be a ally to my Northern Native relatives and friends, I have to be conscious of the ways that I walk with them and beside them, and not want to lead something when I'm being invited, when I'm a guest, right? So we're guests here. And while a lot of people in my family may have been migrating back and forth to this particular land for centuries, since the 1800s, I understand that like we are relatives, but I'm also a guest. And so to move in a good way and to move in a respectful way and to show up when I'm being called, but to step back when I don't need to lead. So I think it's learning how to sway and learning how to adapt. Again, another teaching from the water, learning how to adapt and knowing when to bring the things that you are bringing from your waters and when to just hold it and listen and make space for others. And just sometimes all you're required to do is go sweep. So sometimes you gotta go sleep. Sometimes you gotta go wash the dishes. Sometimes you have to go volunteer in this thing. And sometimes they do ask you, hey, can you bring some ceremony here? So that's what I would say. Trying to be, again, that's why I can't stop bringing this person up. But Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Buddhist monk that may rest in peace, was such a profound elder, such a profound teacher, and bringing into the world this awareness of this mindfulness, living in a mindful way, acting in a mindful way is the key for how to better be an accomplice.
Yeah. Ooh, I love that. Yeah. I think that the majority of our episodes, I always pronounce his name wrong. Thich Nhat Hanh?
Thich Nhat Hanh.
Thich Nhat Hanh. Every time that I think that he's been the one that has been brought up the most in our episodes from the beginning, because his wisdom is just so powerful, and that mindfulness and that, like, you know, that humbling, that we're all in the same human experience together. Mm-hmm. You know, It's so beautiful. Yeah. And in that, I wanted to ask you our last question. And that is, if you could describe radical acceptance and self-care in one word, phrase, or mantra, what would it be?
Abundant love.
Ooh.
Abundant love. Boundless love. When you really look at life, and when you are mindful with your breathing and with all the different airs and wounds that we carry, and you sit with them and you sit with yourself and you face your fears, you face your ego, and you look at the world or the pain that you have lived in the world, but you look deeper and deeper. I think the fabric that brings us together is that abundant love of life, right? So when I think about light, I think about life. I think about water, I think about abundant love. It's just a love like nothing else. Like the incredible, immense emotion that surrounds us. And I feel that we forget, and it's easy to be a shady bitch, you know? I love being shady and petty, you know, it's fun, but it's so damaging to oneself and to just the others. And I just think about what our larger body is, right? So we're little cells, but our larger body is magnificent being that's just spiraling in the universe with so much love. And we forget that. We forget who we are as a planet, as nature, as water, stone, as air. And that's what I think the teachings of the elders and the ancestral teachings and Thich Nhat Hanh's teachings speak about, this boundless love.
Gosh, that's beautiful. I just felt like my chest get all like tingly inside, and when you're just like abundant love, I just felt that warmth in me that, again, it felt like a meditation as you spoke right now. So I appreciate that so much.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate you being here too.
Thank you so much, V. It was a pleasure. First, it was a pleasure just reconnecting at Ceremony in Alcatraz. And then being able to spend time together yesterday and today. I'm just very grateful for what you're doing and for this space that you're holding and you're creating, and this memory that you're archiving. And I appreciate the intention and the care and the coffee that you gave me. I feel very loved and held and nourished too. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, all of us here are really building something really beautiful, and it means a lot to us. And thank you for seeing that beauty in that. And thank you for that bone broth earlier and the little cafecitos, boom, boom, and the plants. Oh, thank you so much, and excited to see what the future holds for all of us.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you. Let's come back.
We have so much more to explore and share with you on the pod. Tap that follow or subscribe button to get every episode as soon as it's released. And give us a 5-star rating or review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And join our wellness community on Instagram at Quest Wellness Pod. This podcast was produced in collaboration by Kinoko Chocolates and Puka Puka Creative. Executive producer, Stevie Kwa. Producer, editor, and sound designer, Leah Jackson. Associate producer, Rafaela Landestoy. Original music produced by Basque. His music is amazing. And we can't forget the emotional support by our fur babies, Frankie, Nugget, and Pukalani. Bow, bow, bow.
Yay! We did it! That was awesome.
Amazing.